All right, I guess it's 7 o'clock, so why don't we go ahead and bring our meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving. And let's see, I guess we'll just start quickly. We'll go into our administrative items. So the first item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Any comments or questions? Yep, David?
Yes, David
Mr. Kaufman, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay, David Kaufman. One topic, and I only remember it specifically because it's become a focus for me since last week. I know that we talked about, that's not on the minutes, is the impact that our district lines are going to have on the Board of Ed election. And I think that should be reflected in the conversation that we had last week to indicate that there was discussion about the impact of redistricting as it relates to both the county council and the school board elections.
Okay, and you mean and to be reflected in the minutes? In
the minutes from last week's meeting.
Okay, great. All right, so let me jump in, I guess. So any other, I guess we'll jump to we'll go ahead and approve the minutes then we'll approve the agenda. Once we have that conversation. Any other comments or clarifications from other members on the minutes? All right, seeing none, can I get a motion to approve the minutes with the change that Mr. Kaufman has suggested?
Yep, so moved.
And second from Mr. Waddy. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Aye. Great. All right, and then for our agenda this evening, I think it's kind of a pretty straightforward agenda like we've had for our previous meetings. Any other issues, changes you'd like to see listed on the agenda? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve our agenda?
So moved.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kaufman. All right, Mr. Fleckenstein, second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Okay, great. All right. So I think this is, our third meeting now? Maybe it's our fourth meeting now since we had the fourth meeting now. I know we had a lot of, I think, good discussion. Fifth meeting? Oh my gosh, it's going by quick. Okay, wow. I know we had a lot of good discussion at the last meeting, because a lot of kind of also some philosophical discussions about things that are important to all of the commission members. I'm hoping tonight, as we have some more iterations, we can kind of really stay focused, dig in, and kind of start addressing our work and kind of start moving some things forward tonight. I know we also have another meeting Wednesday evening, but I guess I would ask if members could keep their comments focused on the redistricting process, what our purpose and function is here this evening. I think that would maybe help us move things along a little bit more quickly and hopefully come up with some resolutions or a proposal that we actually would want to present to for our public hearings and as well also to the council in a timely manner. So with that, I guess, Ms. Kenny, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. I know you have a memo that you shared with the commission this afternoon, and if you could just kind of summarize and talk us through that a little bit. And I know that I think there were some key terms that were brought up at our last meeting, and I'm not sure if all of us understood those terms, so maybe I'm not sure if you are going to address some of those things as well, but maybe we could also let members address those issues just so we're all clear and have a general understanding about what some of those terms mean to each of us as we go forward. But thanks, Ms. Kenny.
Sure. Kelly Kenny, Supervising County Attorney. Hopefully you all received the memo that was sent by Ms. Corby. I apologize that it was kind of late in the day, but I did want to try to get it to you before tonight just so you'd have a chance to take a look at it, and it addresses some of the issues that we had talked about during the last meeting last Monday. So I'm not going to read the whole memo or summarize the whole memo. You can certainly look at that yourselves, and I can answer any questions that you do have. But this is just a very short summary and analysis of the more recent Supreme Court cases discussing redistricting, mainly along the lines of drawing lines based on race or minority districts, because that was really what the focus was during the last meeting, is whether the county should or needs to draw lines based on that. So that's really what this memo focuses on. It's just a very broad overview of the more recent cases that the Supreme Court has decided in just the last couple of years. There's been a lot of cases. You could write a whole book on this, and I'm sure people have written whole books on this. And this office, myself and my attorneys in our office are happy to provide you more analysis or more details on these things if you need a more in-depth dive on some of those. But one of the questions, you'll see that the memo really addresses two of the questions that we talked about the last time that we were here last Monday. One of them there was a discussion of the notion of whether to start from the basis of the existing district lines and just tweaking those lines, or whether we could look at the county with no district lines on it and just kind of start from scratch. And I did last week express some reservation I had about that, so I wanted to look into that a little bit. And we have not found anything that says that the commission cannot propose that. The charter just requires that the districts be revised every 10 years, so a revision, although it would be a major revision, could really entail redrawing the lines anew throughout the county in whatever fashion you see fit. Again, we've talked about this before, that you are constrained to have only 7 districts. You can't have any more, you can't have any less without a charter change, but you would be able to redraw those lines. I would point out, if the more you veer away from the existing lines, if you start drawing lines, completely different around the county, that may open the county up to more challenges with regard to, lots of different things. With if the lines are drawn and the districts are drawn completely differently than before, but that is an option. So I did want to explore that or let you guys know that. If we do find anything, I do have one attorney in my office who is researching that, just to make sure we're not missing anything. So if we do come across something that says, nope, you can't do that, you have to start with the existing lines and tweak them, I will certainly get back to you and let you know on that. And then the other issue that we talked about a little bit the last time was whether there is a requirement or whether the commission should propose lines based on minority districts and the demographics, which OPZ will get into later today, of the county. So we did some research on that, and my memo discusses that. Does someone have? Oh, I thought I heard somebody say something. Okay. So the memo does discuss that, and really, the Supreme Court has considered a lot of different challenges based on lines that are drawn based on race, and most of the cases that I've looked at, the recent cases, have found that those usually violate the Equal Protection Clause. So, this commission should be really wary of proposing anything if race is the sole basis for that. And if you look through my memo, I've quoted a lot of the different Supreme Court cases that talk about that, because again, we get back to the predominant reason for redistricting is to equalize the population. So, you have to do it with those overarching guidelines that were set forth in that memo from Ms. Schuett the last time, and anything that kind of runs afoul of that opens the county up to challenge. And the advice from our office, as always, any advice that we give is to try to not be challenged in court. Our job is to, make sure, give advice to stop any challenges, make sure that things are done constitutionally from the get-go, and withstand any of those challenges. So that's, why we give that advice and say that the commission, and in turn the council, we would give the same advice to the council, should be very wary of engaging in racial gerrymandering. So, we need to keep that in mind. If that's the sole purpose for drawing lines, it's probably going to be found unconstitutional. Now, of course, there is, lots of, and the Supreme Court has kind of recognized this, that there's kind of like a balance there, because, there's the Voting Rights Act, which, ensures that there's not discrimination, versus the gerrymandering. So the Supreme Court has recognized that there is a kind of a balance there. So there are certain situations where, districts can be created to create a minority district, but there's very specific factors that need to be looked at, and those are kind of all set forth in the memo in order to withstand that challenge. So that's on the bottom of page 3, starting at the bottom of page 3, that kind of goes through the factors that the court would look at if there was lines that were drawn that were challenged on gerrymandering. Then they would look through these factors to figure out whether that was constitutional or not. And it's really about, if you look at those factors, it's that the minority group must be sufficiently large and geographically compact to constitute a majority in some reasonably configured legislative district. So I think I said this the first night. We all kind of know what gerrymandering looks like. It's not a compact. It's not contiguous. It's a line drawn for some other reason. The second factor they'll look at is whether the minority group is politically cohesive. And then the third factor is whether the district's white majority must vote sufficiently as a block to usually defeat the minority's preferred candidate. if all of these three conditions are met, then there might be a good reason for lines to be drawn on a race-based basis. But again, those are three factors that in the cases that I've looked at, the recent ones from the Supreme Court, they have not found that they've been met in most cases. They have basically found that the lines that were drawn based on race have been unconstitutional. So, that it's this office advises you to proceed with caution in making that the basis for the drawing of any lines. And where they have found that it's okay, and analyzing that, it's really based on a lot of data. Some of the cases I looked into very, very deep electoral history, back 20 years of data as to voting patterns and things like that. So there would have to be really, those are the types of things that really would constitute a rational basis. And we just, right now we don't have that data that I know of. So there really needs to be something more than just a supposition or, a thought that there might be some reason for it. There really has to be database. So, at this time, I don't think we have any of that I've been made aware of. I'm not going to go through the whole entire memo. I think I touched on the high points. I think the bottom line from our office is that we really highly recommend against that. It cannot be the primary reason. Any minority lines shouldn't be the primary reason for drawing the districts. I'm happy to answer any questions. And I think I mentioned this in the memo and at the outset that there are many, many cases on this. I could write a book. I wouldn't write a book, but somebody could write a book on it. So if you need more details, if you need more information, if you want something delved into a little bit more deeply, we're happy to take a look at that for you as well.
All right, Mr. Kaufman.
David Kaufman. First off, I want to acknowledge and thank you. We had a meeting on Monday, the 22nd, which was technically 2 work days plus a little bit of time today. So this is a lot of information, and thank you for taking care of that, as well as the Office of Planning, for the work that you are going to be getting. I know it's a short turnaround on a Thanksgiving week, so all of you that have been working on our behalf. I also feel like it's informative to the questions that we were asking last week, and provides appropriate and necessary guidance. And I would hope that none of us on the commission would be seeking to utilize race as a sole factor in determining any of our districts. Obviously, as we find out where our population centers are, we're going to find out information where some of that aligns. But I hear you totally. I can sense a little bit of trepidation about us stepping into lands where you're going to have us backpedal. So I acknowledge and appreciate the work you've done to guide us in that direction.
Cool. Thank you, Mr. Kaufman. Now, and I would like to kind of say ditto to what Mr. Kaufman just said. I guess a couple questions. I'm curious. Well, I guess one, obviously, I know the redistricting process, I think mainly it's about trying to adjust and balance out population trends. We want to ensure that we have districts that population-wise are representative, they're somewhat equal within a certain deviation. So I guess, would you say then, so as far as an approach to this, would you advise looking at the population and trying to find out what makes sense, and then we start looking at some of these other factors to ensure that they're balanced within them? Because I'm assuming our current districts, and I know we have the racial makeup and ethnicity and so forth in the information that's been provided, I know that's more or less the approach that was used in the past, correct? So we started with population. We kind of started doing the last meeting population, and then we're looking at how to adjust those lines to ensure that it is equal and that there is balanced representation across all ethnic groups and races and things like that, correct?
Sure. California Supervising County Attorney. I think that is a fair representation, as long as it's not the predominant reason. Then, of course, you can certainly look at those things to make sure that things are spread out equally.
And then in your memo, although I know you say that we could suggest and recommend bringing district lines at the end, you say that it would be much more likely subject to referendum or legal challenge. So I understand the legal challenge aspect of that, but when you say referendum, so does that mean even in our work here, let's say we did, and I'm not advocating that we're going to propose all new districts, and I'm asking the question, I'm just kind of some clarification. So, but if we did do something like that, and that proposal goes to the council, even if the council approved our recommendation, it would still need to go to referendum in the fall? Is that the thought?
No, Cali County Supervising County Attorney, you're right to the point where your recommendation is just a recommendation to the council, then take that next step to go before the council and be a bill that passes. The referendum comes in after a bill passes. If there's a certain number of voters who sign a petition to challenge a bill, it can actually go on the ballot for referendum. If you recall, there was maybe one about 10 years ago with regard to video lottery facilities that was on the ballot. So I think that's the only referendum in at least the last 10 to 15 years that I'm aware of. But that is what that would be. So that requires a good percentage of the registered voters in order to sign that petition for it to be on the ballot.
Great, thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
And then I guess and honestly, in the last week since our last meeting, I've been just kind of thinking through kind of our steps forward and how we move from here. And one thought I had, and I'm just going to throw it out for you guys to consider and think about or whatever, and we can come back later if we want to do that. But I know obviously we have our task in front of us now. We have census data. I know how the populations have shifted in some jurisdictions or some districts. We know that there is an imbalance, particularly in districts 1 and 4, that, maybe, to ensure there is proper representation in the upcoming election, we should discuss and try to address. But I also know we've had a lot of conversations too about other issues and things that maybe should go into redrawing districts and things like that. But now at the same time, I know we're also going to be talking about the possibility of adding more councilmanic districts when we get into the charter part of our conversation. So is there anything that would prohibit us or from, legally, if we wanted to approach this kind of two-pronged approach? Obviously, we know there are issues to address in terms of population trends, so we could identify districts. Maybe that is smaller tweaks to balance some things out. So we have a proposal to actually submit within the time frame that the council has indicated through their resolution. But we also know we have a conversation about whether or not we should be expanding councilmanic districts. And as a part of that conversation, I would assume we would also need to have a discussion about what those districts would look like if we're expanding them. So I guess legally, is that something that could we kind of do this as a two-pronged approach, something more in the near term, but then it gives us time to talk about what these new districts would look like, what the lines may be for those, and kind of present that to the council at the same time. And I guess if so, if we do that, can we do that legally, and what would that process look like if we were going to do something like that?
Cali County Supervising County Attorney. So that will have to happen in a two-pronged approach, as you indicated. The first step being, so you would still have to redistrict and stick with the 7 councilmanic districts. That would be your first goal. And then if there was the desire to propose additional districts, then that would have to go forward as a charter amendment. So that could certainly be recommended to the council, that you would add however many additional districts. I think somebody, rightfully suggested that it should be an odd number of districts. So you always have an odd number of men. So, that would kind of be, I would say, in your overall recommendation to the council with regard to charter revisions. And then that, of course, would have to pass by the council, and then that charter revision for additional councilmanic districts would have to be on the ballot either next fall in 2022 on the timing, or in the fall of 2024. And then that would have to be approved by a majority of the voters in order for the additional councilmanic districts to be added in. So the lines wouldn't be officially drawn on any new councilmanic districts. I mean, certainly I think that they could be proposed in theory as to how you would suggest the lines should be. And I can certainly give you more details on how the logistics would play out on that. They wouldn't be official until there, number one, you'd have to have the council pass it, the charter question pass in the ballot by the voters, and then get to the point of drawing the districts. So that would happen sometime, in the future, 2 or more years away. And as far as the logistics of how that would work, because obviously if there was additional council manager districts added in, then there would be some districting that would have to occur outside of the 10-year time frame. So we can contemplate how that would work, because I'm sure that that's happened. I'm sure it probably has at some point in the history of the county, so I could look back and see how it occurred before. But it really would be, again, at least a two-pronged approach that this commission would have to take.
Okay, but so process-wise, it is something that we could, in the near term, determine what districts would look like using this current 7 to ensure there is proper representation based on population, and then we could, in the next phase, we could do something like that and propose it. It is a full process. Okay.
Right, Kelly County Supervising County Attorney, you have to work with the 7 districts that you have now and equal those out really before you would get to the next point.
Right. Okay. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure whose light was on first.
Oh, I don't know.
So, Mr. Fleckenstein, go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Telfer.
Yeah.
Tom Fleckenstein. Kelly, I want to make sure I understand the question and then the answer. Are you saying that the process as it currently exists would essentially be, within our year, we would recommend the council, say, expand to 9 districts, and the council would accept that would go on the referendum, and if it passed, that districts would have to be drawn at that point in time? I mean, if I understand this right, the authority under our county charter currently is that this commission every 10 years recommends the districts. Is that right? Then it goes to the council for potential approval and then to the voters for final approval, right? So if we didn't, let's say we did all at some point decide we wanted 9 districts, we would have to, at the same time, propose a district map for those districts, correct? If we didn't, and there was just a vote to approve expanding the council, that would happen in 2022 or let's say even 2024, then there wouldn't be a charter revision commission at that point in time that would be able to draw the districts, right?
Yeah, Kelly County Supervising County Attorney, that it is an interesting question because because I'm not sure that you can draw the lines for districts before you know that 9 districts are going to be approved by the council or by the voters. So I think we need to know, and I need to look at a little bit into the timing of how that would work, because you can't approve it, and the council can't approve the line. So this commission, even if you were to say, here's where I think 9 districts should be, the council still has to go through the step of approving that charter revision, because it's not redistricting at that point, because the charter only provides for 7 districts. So there has to be a charter change in order for there to be any more districts, which has to be approved by the council and then by the voters. So I'm not sure that you can draw the lines for that district, and this commission has no authority to draw the official lines anyways. It still has to be the council to draw those lines. So as far as the timing, you would have to consider how that would work as to when those lines would be drawn if the 9 districts were to be approved. So I think it is a logistical question, if you get to that point, but we're talking, years and years down the road. So the council can't approve the lines of a district that aren't even approved yet. You have to have the approval and the authority to go forward with 9 districts before those lines can even be drawn. But I see the second part, and I kind of insinuated to this, that it is interesting. I'm not sure the charter contemplates that, because the charter only provides for redrawing the lines every 10 years. So it's an interesting proposition to determine how that can happen. It certainly is an option. But I'll kind of think through that timing and see how we would do that and see if it's happened before in the past, because I'm sure that when this county first became a charter county, I don't think there were 7 districts. So I'm sure that we can look back at the history and see how the districts were added on.
I think that would be a huge consideration for us in going forward that session. I don't think it's not something I'd consider, so it's food for thought. Okay.
Yeah, the Kelly County Supervising County Attorney certainly can make a suggestion as to where they think the line should be drawn, along with your proposal that there should be additional districts. I think you'd have to, right? Because you would determine that you're going to propose 9 districts for this reason, and here's basically what we think they should be. But again, those lines won't be official for a long time in the future. But all those other steps to go first.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thanks, Kelly. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yeah, and I got thinking through, and I was trying to, approaches we could take to kind of move us forward in this discussion we're having now to ensure there is adequate representation for the upcoming election and what that process could look like going forward. But Mr. Telford, go ahead.
Larry Telford for law office. If we were to want to create 9 districts, is there anything in the charter that would prevent and let's say it goes through all the various steps, do we get to that point, the voters actually approve 9 districts? Is there anything that prevents the county council at that point from creating a second charter revision committee during this 10-year period to address the new 9-district map?
Well, the charter only allows for the Kelly County Supervising County Attorney. The charter only allows for the creation of the Charter Review Commission every 10 years. So another suggestion and thing that we might want to think about is if the council is going to go forward with proposing additional districts, that we might want to, as part and parcel or hand in hand with that, do another revision that would allow for the appointment of an interim, another commission to redraw those lines if that were to occur. So that might be another way to deal with that as well.
Okay, it also sounds like from a practical matter, logistical matter, it might make sense for the Charter Revision Commission of 2030 to actually address this issue, correct? Wouldn't the timing of all that make more sense?
Kelly County Supervising County Attorney, are you saying for 2030 for the commission then to consider adding additional districts or to draw the lines for those districts?
Drawing. I mean, let's say the voters approve the nine districts. I think we could time this in such a way where the next commission would be the ones that actually recommend what that looks like to the council.
Sure, Kelly County Supervising County Attorney, that is another option as well.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm certainly going to look into this. I know Mr. Keisler had mentioned that Queen Anne's County, they're not a charter county, but they're a commissioner county, but they added in an additional district there. So I'll certainly look and see how their timing played out. I don't know, their code is probably a little bit different than ours, but I can certainly look and see how other counties have done it, because there certainly are others who have added in districts as well, and look at their timing.
Okay, great. All right, Mr. Kaufman?
Yeah, David Kaufman. While you're, for the law office, while you're fact-finding, if it's possible to determine whether or not the council could approve a district recommendation pending the approval of the referendum, making their vote prior to the election be contingent upon the result of the referendum. I'm concerned about just a recommendation to add 2 council members without any real rationale that the general public has to consider for that. To me, absent the districts, there's really no reason to add 2 people to the governing body until we've offered a suggestion. I'm totally aware that our suggestion is simply a recommendation that the council can or does not, they can adopt or don't adopt. But if I'm a voter and I'm reading on the referendum a charter revision that recommends moving from 7 to 9 council members, and it's not associated with any geographic discussion, it just sounds like we're wanting politicians to the mix, and that might be a distasteful conversation. But if we're talking about having representation and the nature of the nature of our geographic distribution is the rationale for that, it seems like they're interconnected. So I would hate to have us string this out for 10 years when the original intent of this commission may be to address a geographic problem with distribution that doesn't actually get addressed because it's now 10 years later. I get it. I mean, I understand the sequencing if it takes that long, but I would just like to see whether or not there's even, and maybe they can't make a vote in July that's contingent upon the results of a referendum. But if you can find out if that's possible, that would also inform, I think, our discussion.
Kelly County Supervising County Attorney, yes, I will certainly look into that. These are all interesting questions. Sorry, I don't have answers for all of them. I'd be happy to.
That's
look
okay.
into
I kind of sprung it out there. But in my thoughts and in my views of how to move us forward to coming to some resolution for at least the first step, first duty that we have here, I was just kind of thinking through what options we could be looking at, knowing some of the other conversations that we've had and interest and and so forth. But anyway, I know Mr. Fleckenstein.
I'm going to unfortunately, Tom Fleckenstein, I'm going to unfortunately add to your research burden, which I apologize profusely for. I know how that is. Is there anything in county law that you're aware of that would prevent us from establishing at-large council members that did not require a geographic district?
Kelly County Supervising County Attorney, I actually do have an answer to that one because that question was raised at some point early on in this process. And there was nothing that we found that would prohibit us from doing that. Again, that would also require a charter change.
No, understood.
But, we did look into whether we would be allowed to do that, and there's nothing that would prohibit that.
Okay.
And a lot of other counties do have them. In fact, I think there's a good number that do.
Right. That would just eliminate the need to draw new districts. If we added 2 at-large, right, we'd have 7 districts and 2 at-large council persons. That could have, again, not advocating that, not saying that we would even consider that with what the data is, but I guess that could solve a potential problem. Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. Good, I didn't add to your burden.
Sometimes we can anticipate the questions.
Mr. Sisal, I think you were going to put your light on. Do you have a comment or question?
Pretty much all the questions that I had have been answered.
Great. Thank you. Yes. Well, thank you. I appreciate at least indulging me in the conversation. Because I guess I would say I think ensuring our councilmanic districts for the 2022 election, ensuring that they are balanced and fair population-wise and other is just really, it's important to me. And I guess I wouldn't want to not take that part of our responsibility seriously as we have these conversations and try to develop a proposal to just wanted to explore what other options could be to ensure that we do have that result in the nearer term while we can kind of grapple through the other conversations we're going to be having over the next at least 6 months, 8 months, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But anyway, so thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions or comments from Ms. Kenny? All right. Okay. If not, then, okay. Mr. Burt, I'll go ahead and I'll turn it over to you. I know you have a presentation of a series of maps and things that you're going to summarize for us today. And let me ask, so is that information, I know we have some information I know was sent earlier. Do we have that we can pull up on our laptops? Or is that just on the screen?
It's in the Drive folder.
In the Drive, okay.
You can get to that.
Okay, yep.
Yeah, it's actually in the main folder. I decided not to make it too difficult. It's called Demographic Report 2010 to 2020.
I'm sorry, what was that called again?
It starts with
Demographic.
Demographic Report 2010.
And we have a hard copy here? Is
Yes,
that
you do.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you. Okay, Mr. Burt, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mark Burt, Office of Planning and Zoning. Tonight, I wanted to review the report that was put together for the commission here over the past few days. It's a demographic report comparing the 2020 and 2010 decennial census. So what I'm going to touch on tonight is give you an overview of the report. I'll touch on some trends over the 50 years, over the past 50 years in county population. I will touch on the total population, and then we'll review the maps for the different race and ethnic categories and for the total population. Feel free to stop me if you have any questions or want to discuss anything along the way. So, sorry about that. Just a quick introduction here. Excuse me. Yeah, this report does give you a little overview of the demographic history of Anne Arundel County. Over the past 50 years, the counties grew at a 49% growth rate. over the past 50 years. Over the past 10 years, the county's added just over 46,000 residents. That's a little over a 7, almost an 8% growth rate. Throughout this report, you'll see maps and charts and graphs comparing the 2010 census to the 2020 adjusted numbers that we received from the state. It does contain some definitions on the census data. It goes through the different race categories and ethnic categories. So 50 years in the county here. I'll zoom in on this so we can see a little better. There we go. So like I said, over the past 50 years, Anne Arundel County grew by 49%. In 1970, the population was just under 300,000 residents, and has grown now to almost 600,000 at 585,427 residents. You can see in the chart there the upward trend in population. In the next table we have here, you can see the addition of residents into the county. Peaking in 1970 was 72,000, almost 73,000 residents joining the county, and to the numbers from the past census of 46,057. And that leaves us with a declining growth rate in the county. You can see in the chart on the screen now, the growth rate has steadily declined over the past 50 years to its current rate of 7.8% or 7.87%. And we'll get into with that. We can look at some trends going out. We do have forecasted populations through the Baltimore Metropolitan Council of Governments. We do a forecast for them, and it gets fed up. So we do have those numbers that we can start to look into and see what the trends or what we think the county is going to, what the population of the county is going to be moving forward. Looking at the population. Now we're into total population for 2010 to 2020. We're looking at the overall population for the 7 districts currently. You can see every district grew over the past 10 years. And that growth rate can be seen here. We did find something interesting in the number with the population number for District 6. We noticed that we thought it was severely undercounted, so we started looking at the numbers, and we did find a census block that didn't have any population in it, that had population in 2010, and that was the census block for the Naval Academy. Thank you. For the Naval Academy. That was an undercount of 4,434 residents. And if you add that to the 76,000 that's in the table there, that brings us up to a number that is within the 5% range that we're looking for. So the charts and graphs that we saw last time, that would bring us up to a good number. For this, we're going to be looking at that adjusted population that we got. Mr. Kaufman?
David Kaufman. So are you saying that our total population, the official figure, is an 80,000 figure?
It will be. Mark Burt from Office of Planning and Zoning. There is a process to submit adjustments to the census. That process starts, I believe, either in January or June. I'm getting my J's mixed up right now. But it starts in 2022 after we're done with our charge here.
Is there anything related to the census process? I know, prisons go through different, calculations as to who they count towards and so forth. Is there anything about the Naval Academy that falls under that variance that caused it to be legitimately removed?
Actually, we did some research. We contacted the academy. They pointed us to their website where they had on there for all academy students to be counted here in Annapolis where they were going to reside at that time. We're not sure if it was with the pandemic that they didn't get counted or it just didn't happen or what happened with it. But we will be putting in for those adjusted numbers.
Hi, Christina Pompa with the Office of Planning and Zoning. While this does explain why it looks like there was virtually no growth in District 6, I do want to point out that even if the numbers do get adjusted later, it is going to be too late for this commission. So it's an interesting fact, but we can't assume that the numbers exist when right now they do not.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so then it's something like Andrea Mansfield. Okay, so given that, it's not something we should then really factor in to how we address or redraw the districts for the upcoming thing. Okay.
Mark Bird, Office of Planning and Zoning. We just found it really interesting. So we were looking at the numbers, going, what's going on here?
Okay.
Kind of deal.
Thank you.
So in the chart on the screen currently, you can see that, like I said, every district grew. Some districts grew faster than others over the past 10 years. Our fastest grower was District 4. And they District 4, grew, just over 13.5%, adding 12,000, a little over 12,000 residents, and having a total population of just over 91,000. Almost 91,500.
Sorry, Mr. Telford?
Larry Telford for, don't know if it's law or planning and zoning. Do we know the voting status of the cadets of the Naval Academy when it comes to local elections? In other words, Anne Arundel County elections?
That's Mark Burt, Planning and Zoning. That's the question we had also.
Okay.
If they vote in local elections or not. We're not 100% sure on that answer. We would have to find out for you.
Okay. If it turns out they need to be an Anne Arundel County resident before they go to the Naval Academy, there wouldn't be that many of that 4,500 anyway then. Okay, thanks.
Okay, Mark Bird, Office of Planning and Zoning. Any questions about the table on the screen? Moving forward, all right. Again, this graph is just showing the difference in population, the population change, all positive population change, and then looking at the population difference or population growth. So we can take a look at the maps here, and I'll have to zoom back out. This is on page 12. We're on 11 and 12. So we can see the total population here. And that map got messed up. And that's my apologies. And then the total population for 2020. We'll get you an updated 2010 population map.
All right, so, sorry, David Kaufman. Neither map looks like the color distribution that I'm looking at here.
You may have received an old version. 12.
This is 12, right?
Yeah.
Tom Fleckenstein. So is that the correct one, or is the page that we've got in our hard copy the correct one?
This should be the correct one.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's the right, the wrong one with that?
Because I know I corrected that first time.
We don't have to put this in the minutes. I just want to reflect that I was not asked to change the input on the
Noted.
smart move.
Okay, so Mr. Burt, you're going to pull up different maps, correct?
Yes.
So the printed copy is the right copy?
Mark Burt, Planning and Zoning. Let's check and see here on page 11 if that looks quite like your page 11. We can zoom in here a little bit more. Yeah, yeah, I gotcha.
David is our new Vanna.
Yeah, that looks a whole lot better to me on the screen there. My apologies for showing you guys the wrong version of these maps.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, just to clear, so in this printed copy that we have here, that is the correct map, yes? I mean, it looks, at least from here, it looks, okay. Okay.
Yeah, I can't find that happy medium. There. Okay. Mark Burt, Planning and Zoning, how does that look all right? I mean, I know it's still hard to see on the screen, my apologies. Again, we're looking at the total population for 2010. So we can see, you know, most of our population in 2010 was centered in the center of the county. In 2020, the population didn't shift very much in the county. Still centered, you know, in District 2 there.
And that's not page 12, right?
Yeah, we're on page 12 now. Okay, Mark Burt, Planning and Zoning. Continuing on, looking at race and ethnicity, looking at Hispanic origin. The population, the Hispanic origin population grew from 2010 to 2020 in all districts. It grew at a rate of 42% for the county, and as high as 52, almost 53% in District 1.
Mr. Burke, I'm sorry, I just wanted to, for those who don't have the benefit of being able to see what we're looking at, to describe a little bit about the previous two maps, just to identify where the population, not necessarily where, but what color-coded population centers might be looking at, what we might be looking at in terms of the color code.
Yeah, so anywhere where it looks like the map is blank or has like a little bit of shading in it, that's a census block with 0 population. Moving up to the 1 to 250 population category is a dark green. A lighter green is 251 to 500. In yellow is 501 to 1,000 residents. Orange is 1,001 to 2,000 residents. And in red is 2001 to 2000, or in this map, 2001 to 2,121 residents.
For 2020.
For 2020.
Okay, per census block.
Per census block, correct.
Okay.
Which was the 4450 for them. Just for now.
Yeah, in the first map,
Excuse me, Larry Telford for Mr. Burt. A nerd question on the Broadneck Peninsula. That red splotch there, is that the community college?
It's 2010.
Are you on the 2010 or 2020 map, page 11 or 12?
I'm on page 12.
The 2020? Yeah, I would have to be able to identify that census tract to see where it is.
I mean, it looks, so like if someone lives in Glen Burnie but goes to the community college for the census purposes, are they counted there?
They should be counted at their home address.
Okay. So is that not the community college? It almost looks like where it would be. Anyway, I don't want to hold this up. I was just curious about the question of would the community college itself probably should have a census of 0 since no one lives there, correct?
It should, unless the census distributed and put population there.
Okay, thanks.
Tom Fleckenstein from Mark. I want to make sure I'm reading that right as well. I see the red spot in District 5. Doesn't that look like is that more Severna Park than it is Broadneck? Is that Ritchie Highway, kind of that straight line coming down, kind of close? That's the Severn River, correct?
Hi, Christina Pompa with the Office of Planning and Zoning. Yes, the one straight line going through District 5 is Route 2.
Okay, and that's the Severn River, then, that body of water to the left of that, right?
That is correct.
Okay, all right.
So as far as Anne Arundel Community College, because I happen to be doing some research on the community college today for another project, I actually think that there's a gray area sitting under the I and the S of District 5, and I think that that is the community college. Now, the map that I worked with briefly today with Mark on is a live map that you can actually click on these blocks and get information. Within this, and I believe we're going to be giving them that tool, but right now, these maps are static, so we do not have the ability right now to click in to get detailed data on, on specific areas.
It's the census block.
So what is, so looking at that, I'm assuming then that gray area is the community college. The red area down below is what, based on that map?
Census block, that long census block.
Yeah, I think that makes sense now.
It's in the Arnold community.
Oh, okay.
Like all the
Yeah.
townhomes and all that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It's back behind there.
Yeah, okay, that would make sense, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
the community college, in this map, I think where the I and the S is,
That is the community college.
It is the community college. We can flip back to this web map that I have that shows the community college there, with it carved out.
Okay. All right. So I guess any more specific questions about the map, the 2020 census data? All right. I guess,
The only other thing I wanted to bring up, Stephen Whitey, only reason I wanted to bring it up, another thing was that the map is, in our document, it's within the district maps. So for those who don't have the opportunity to see, we also have the opportunity to look at the district maps for the adjusted 2020 population in this document. That's all.
okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Burt, go ahead.
Thank you. Mark Burt, Planning and Zoning. Continuing on with the Hispanic origin. 75? Okay, yeah. We can see that in the two charts here that the population of the Hispanic origin population grew tremendously over the past 10 years. It was the fastest growing racial and ethnic population. District 1 grew the most of all, with a 52.85% or 5,344 residents. With District 3 and 7 also seeing a plus 50% increase. And here are the population maps for 2010. And we can see the population distribution pretty much low all over the county. District 6 and 2 there, and 4, a couple higher pockets of population. And we can see in 2020 the same pockets of population. You will start to see in some of the 2020 maps a blue census tract. This is the same census tract that loses population every time. My estimation is that's where one of the major prisons is located in that census tract, and that's why we're seeing negative negative numbers in that tract, or that block, sorry. So moving on to the non-Hispanic white population, or ethnic group. So the count for the adjusted census count for 2020 for the Hispanic white population was 300,667.43. Was that like that? No. It's 300,067,435 residents, which is a decrease of 5.98% or 21,964 residents from 2010. All council districts in Anne Arundel County lost non-Hispanic white population over the 10 years, with District 2 losing 14%, the highest percentage of loss. And we can see the distribution maps here. Again, with the red to green scale, greens being lower population, reds being higher population, we can see that it's fairly well distributed over the county. In 2020, the same red to green. You will notice in the last population category, the red category, the range can be a little high. We tried to keep the ranges close to each other for both of the maps, leaving those end ranges to fly out. We did make sure that there were, so you'll see in 2020 we have it cut off at 1,642, and in 2010 we had it cut off at 3,278. We did look at the outliers to make sure that was an okay range to have, and there were only a couple in that group, so it was a very, 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 very small number in that group.
Okay. Mr. Kaufman?
David Kaufman, I'm trying to hear what you're saying and look at what we're looking at. In District 3, mm-hmm. I see what appears to be an increase in the number of yellow. There is one geographic or one census block that goes from orange to yellow. Did you say that every district went down, or is that a statistically significant number, or just that it statistically wasn't as high as it was before?
It's just
3.
It doesn't have the same population that it had before.
So,
and I can see where you're saying they're right on the peninsula there. In the 2010, there's a nice large orange spot, kind of by my cursor here on the screen.
Yep.
And then in 2020, it goes to yellow. So it did lose population.
No, that one I see. I just see it looks like there is a, I guess not a balance, but it looks like there's an increase in the non-Hispanic white population throughout the district. I'm just wondering if the reduction was that significant in the orange.
Let's take a look. So we're looking at okay, non-white. This is a tool that you'll have access to, or you should have access to. We're in the throes of updating the legends so they're all kind of standardized. To get to that, so we're looking.
Mind you, there's not a point I'm making other than trying to understand the
Yeah, I guess I'm confused because I'm looking at the other charts. It looks like the non-Hispanic white population declined in all districts. So wouldn't that be reflected correctly then if it's going from orange to left?
Mark Burt, Office of Planning and Zoning. It all depends on what the population decrease was in those. Because the range is 500 to, 501 to 1,250.
Okay.
Mark, I'm sorry. On the other census block, you said we had access to adjusted census block 2020. It was a different. Yes, that one. How do yours look so much better than mine? Is there in our access to this? Is there a different way that we can access the map to see it similar to how you see it?
This one?
Yes, your visualization.
You do. You should have access to this. Laura, did we send that link out to them for this?
Yeah, we do have that. Yeah. And I guess I know we have a lot of questions and we're trying to seek clarification on things, which I think seeing it in this way, it's helpful for me overall, but maybe we could let Mr. Burt get through the presentation and maybe go back and ask questions at that point. Otherwise, I think we're going to be here for hours going through this way. So thank you.
Well, there's I think a good illustration of kind of what can happen in between census years. We can take a look at this block, and it's a pretty big block with 478 people in it. And then you go in the next year, and it's a smaller block. So I mean, that's so one thing that can happen is blocks get cut up into smaller bits. Oh, yeah, we'll go through this this app here in a few minutes.
Okay.
I'll pick up the pace here. my apologies.
No, we have lots of questions too. It's all good.
So what I'll do is I'll go right to these charts, and we can talk from the charts and then look at the maps. Overall, for the non-Hispanic Black population, from 2010 to 2020, in all but two councilmanic districts, the non-Hispanic Black population increased, with District 4 seeing the highest percentage of increase. District 3 seeing the highest percentage of increase of 42%, only adding 3,797 residents, and District 4 adding 6,610 residents. So we can go to the population distribution maps here. For 2010, I can zoom out on this, put it on one page. And so we can see that the population distribution is pretty much in District 6, 2, and 4, 1 and also 1. And then in the 2020 population distribution, we do see a shift to this centralized area here with District 1 and 4. For the non-Hispanic American Indian and Alaskan Native population, we start to see major decreases in populations when we start to look at these smaller racial and ethnic groups. And they are a small part of the population in the county. The non-Native American Indian and Alaska Native population is only 0.2% of the population of the whole county. There were some pretty significant declines in that population. 90 residents, leaving District 7, and 90% of the population, or 56 residents, moved out of District 5. So overall, the American Indian and Alaska Native population decreased in all but 2 council districts. And here's a distribution, a population distribution for 2010. And the population distribution for 2020. And again, keep in mind that is an adjusted 2020 number.
Just point out.
In these 2 maps, you'll notice the orange and some of the standardization of the legend and the categorization of population. With these smaller populations, it's a little harder to categorize them. So the orange on the 2010 map will represent 10 residents, while the orange in the 2020 map will also represent 10. So some of the legends will be a little different. Moving to the non-Hispanic Asian population. The non-Hispanic Asian population grew in every district in the county. Overall, there was a 27.9% population growth increase for the county. The difference between 2020 and 2010 was right around 7,000 residents. And the non-Hispanic Asian population makes up right around 4.3% of the county's population. Here we can see in the map on the screen the distribution of non-Hispanic Asian population for 2010. Keeping in mind the light green's 1 to 50, the yellow's 51 to 100, orange 101 to 150, and red 151 to 274. Those are residents. District 1 and 2 seems to be pretty much in the center of the county, where the population center is. The 2020 adjusted population distribution. Again, the blue is negative population growth, and there's one census block in the northwestern part of the county, District 1, that shows that. 1 to 50 is the green color. Yellow is 51 to 100. Orange is 101 to 150. Red is 151, and this map ends with 274 residents. You can see some population growth in the Crofton area and in the northwestern part of District 1 and the central part of District 2. So the non-native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander population, this population grew in I think in 5 out of the 7 councilmanic districts between 2010 and 2020, with an overall 4.62 growth rate. This population only makes up 0.07% of the county population. It's a very, very, very small population we have in the county. We take a look at the distribution. This is the distribution for 2010. The green is 1 to 2 residents. The dark green is 1 to 2 residents. The light green is 3 to 4. Yellow is 5 to 7. Orange is 8 to 11. And red is 12 to 13 residents. We'll scroll to the next 2020 map here. And in the 2020 map, the blue again is negative population. The dark green is 1 to 2. The medium green is 3 to 4, and the yellow is 5 to 6 residents. Moving on to the non-Hispanic, some other race population for the county in 2020 was 3,074 residents. This was an increase of 2,194 residents, or 71.37% from 2010. This category only makes up 0.53% of the county population. From looking at the table, you can see that almost every councilmanic district did see an increase of this population, with District 3 having a 78% increase. Like I said, it's a very, very small population in the county at 0.53%. So we can take a look at the distribution here. In 2010, the green is 1 to 5 residents, the yellow 6 to 10 residents, the orange 11, and the red 12 to 15 residents. And now the distribution of residents for 2020. Again, the blue is negative population growth. The green is 1 to 5 residents. The yellow is 6 to 10. The orange is 11 to 15. And the red is 16 to 28 residents. And the last category that we'll review is the non-Hispanic, all persons 2 or more races. This category population was 31,122 in 2020. This was a 58.98 increase from 2010, or 18,356 residents. This group makes up 5.32% of the county population in 2020. You can see in the chart here that every councilmanic district grew in this population. And we'll move on to the population distribution map for 2010. Again, with the green being 1 to 25 residents, the yellow 26 to 50, the orange 51 to 100, the red 100 to 251. And then the population distribution map for 2020. Again, with the green being 1 to 25 residents, the yellow 26 to 50, the orange 51 to 100, and the red 101 to 118 residents.
Larry Telford for a question from Mr. Burt. On the multiracial data, does some of this have to do with people describing themselves differently in 2020 than they would in 2010, or is this a category that was prominently used 10 years ago? Do you have any sense of that?
I'm not quite sure if people are identifying now with more of 2 races. Just from the definition, People may choose to provide two or more races either by checking two or more race box responses, providing multiple responses, or by providing some combination of check boxes and other responses. The race response category on the questionnaire are collapsed into 5 minimum race groups identified by the Office of Budget and Management. And for data purposes, two or more races refers to combinations of two or more of the following race categories: white, black or African American, American Indian or Alaskan Native, Asian, Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, or some other race.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Burt. So does any commission members have any questions or comments about the data that was just reviewed? All right. So, Mr. Burt, do you have other maps and things to show us this evening? I think you were...
Mark Burt, Office of Planning and Zoning. I did not run any additional scenarios this week. It was more focused on getting this report together and the web app that we can take a look at now if you would like.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So I guess then, I know at our last meeting we discussed having this display for this evening, and then for Wednesday night, additional maps with kind of a key that would show different population densities with overlays of communities of interest. I guess one question about the communities of interest, I know, Ms. Pompa, you mentioned in the GDP discussion, some of those, they were identified through the GDP discussion. I guess, could you just explain those a little bit more in detail, what those are and what those communities of interest look like, just so we're all clear?
In the county's general development plan, Plan 2040, which was adopted May 3rd, 2021, they have a map that represents communities. It's not called communities of interest, just to be clear. And my understanding of that map is that it was originally generated using zip code data, and then it went through multiple iterations of public process where the public was allowed to comment on the map, and then the boundaries were changed. One of the difficulties that we found in working with the communities map that originates from the general development plan is that really we do not have the ability to just draw a line through a census block and know what the population distribution is on either side of that line. So while it was a beautiful idea to use the community information out of the GDP to help us, I would say, and I would also ask Mr. Burt to chime in here, I don't think it's been as helpful as we thought it was going to be, because we do not have the ability to subdivide census block data with any confidence.
Okay. And I guess I'll just want to, I know that Mr. Waddy's coming back. I'm sorry. Should have waited for you to be here to ask the question, maybe. But Mr. Waddy, I was just asking for further clarification about the communities of interest, or I guess really communities designated through the GDP that we were going to use as an overlay to discuss the districts as we tried to draw our lines. And that was just what Ms. Pompa was saying, is that it may not be the most perfect fit. Just because they can't move the census, they can't draw the lines around the census tracts, and it's hard to know what is actually in those blocks by doing it with that approach. But yes.
Christina Pompa with the Office of Planning and Zoning. So I am a process and procedure person, which you may have gleaned, but you are going to have public hearings coming up where the public is going to be allowed to comment on options and different alternatives. And that is an opportunity, I don't want to use the word opportunity, that is going to be the chance for the public to tell us information about neighborhoods, what they believe those communities of interest are. to get into significant detail. Your first public hearing is going to be on December 13th, and there's another one on the 17th. And as I sat here listening to the opening discussion tonight about more than 7 districts, at-large districts, one of the questions I would ask you to think about for next meeting is, what options do you really want to present to the public to ask them to comment on? Because, Ms. Corby, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're going to have to have options to give the public to comment on. And those options actually, in my opinion, could be more than just the 7 districts. And you could, the county residents, they could come back in and say, we think 9 districts is a crazy idea because, we don't think we need that right now. Or they could say, yeah, we saw it happen in Prince George's County and we thought it was brilliant. So I would just suggest that you may want to think bigger for the public hearing, the 2 dates, to really get input from more people in the county that may be interested in this topic.
Thank you. I appreciate the comment. I think in my mind, how we might approach this, this is obviously for discussion, but I think a couple of things. One, I think we need to think through what we're going to propose, because I'm going to make the assumption, and I know what we say when you use the word assume and so forth, but we have 7 sitting council members, some of whom are term limited and can't run again, but we have several others that are expecting to run again. And I guess that kind of gives me, some pause of, proposing something like that right now that is going to so close to, that date, trying something and proposing something that is going to push members out of their current district or create some other scheme just causes pause for me, because one, yes, we're making a recommendation that's going to go to the council. I also don't see them really liking or accepting that recommendation, considering where things are sitting right now. So in my mind, it was kind of a 2 separate, we have this process now for the redistricting piece, we have the other charter issues, and we'll have more public hearings and discussions on that piece. And I think that's where these other issues, where the public would have a chance to comment on all the various things that were outlined in the resolution that the council passed for us to consider in our discussions. So I'm not sure I guess my thought was we wouldn't get into that type of detail now, just because I think it complicates things a little bit more than maybe we need to. But thank you, but I appreciate your saying. Mr. Snow? Oh, Mr. Kaufman?
David Kaufman. If I'm looking at these maps correctly, is there 0 variance between our districts and the census blocks? Or is there any variance within the lines in our current model where we're, as we described, putting a district line through the middle of a census block? So
nowhere that I could find.
Okay, so it is 100% tied to the census blocks as it currently sits, right?
Yeah, as far as I've researched.
Okay. Just making an observation.
Mr. Snow?
Sure. Tori Snow. I just wanted to weigh in on the discussion that's kind of looming and then kind of respond to your remarks about the options before the public. One of the things when I was doing my research on these maps, I could not escape the fact that literally half of Anne Arundel County's population is crammed into the northwest corner of the county. And right now, that encompasses like 1 district, maybe 2, if you put District 4 and District 1 there. And I was looking through the map, the demographic data, and all of these shifts in the population centers, and I could not escape from the fact that there's very little logical about the way that the council districts are drawn right now. Being mindful of the concerns of sitting council members and things like that, the approach that I'm taking to this is I would like the public to feel like this is something that we are doing for them, not for those that are sitting in office right now. And to the degree that we can keep things stable, keep things logical in a way that makes sense for the community, I do feel that that would be helpful. And honestly, I do feel that given what we've seen here, given the demographic data that we've seen, given the current issues, I think that at least as I was going through this does not have to be that difficult. If you look at it from the logical divisions, I'm looking at BWI, I'm looking at the Patuxent Environmental Center, and I'm just looking at the way that northwest corner of Anne Arundel County is set up. And so to the degree that was mentioned about giving the public options to chime in on, I certainly think that we should let our public hearings reflect input from the community. Do they want adjustments to what we kind of have? Or do they want something that, are they open to something that's a little different and perhaps more reflective of specifically the incredible growth and incredible concentrations of communities that we have out in the Western District? So I just wanted to weigh in with my thoughts on that for the record.
Yeah, and Mr. Stein, I think I would fully expect at our hearings we're going to hear a broad range of comments and things, but I do think as a commission, I think we are responsible, and I think it is behooved upon, we should be putting out some options for them to take a look at to kind of help narrow that focus and what that's going to look like. I think it would help them provide comment, but also be able to look. I know for me, if I can see something more concretely, I can be like, oh, well, maybe I don't like this here. It should be tweaked here, and how that would come together. Which does have me kind of thinking, kind of Ms. Palma, as you were, I think you're right, we do need to put options out there for these public hearings, and in my mind trying to get from where we are now to where we have options to put out there. I guess I'm going to do it again and throw something out, which was kind of in the strategic document that we went through some time ago, and Mr. Wada, you mentioned it the last meeting as well, whispered to me. But I guess I'm going to say, to try to move it forward, I mean, we don't have that much time before this public hearing on the 13th, and we need something to put out there. So I guess I'm going to ask what the willingness would be of a couple of you, maybe to kind of buckle down, put your heads together, work with planning and zoning, more specifically to kind of develop a couple maps and options that we could then discuss as a commission and give some sort of approval to, that those would be the ones that we put out there for public discussion, for public hearings. Just because I kind of feel like, I mean, all the data is great, and thank you for pulling this together. It really was helpful for me to see some of these shifts and trends, but I kind of feel like the seven of us sitting here, I'm not quite sure how because there's always a lot of questions. We're trying to see clarification and how we kind of drill down to actually have a proposal or a couple proposals to put out there for public comment. I'm having a hard time seeing that come together. So as I'm proposing, if there's a few of you, a couple, two or three that would be interested in working on that and working with planning and zoning to do something like that, hopefully that's workable for you guys. But I think that might be a really important step in kind of moving us forward to determining what these proposed districts could look like. So, Mr. Burt.
It's Mark Burt, Office of Planning and Zoning. If you want to start doing that tonight, as I offered in the last meeting, we can start drawing tonight if you wanted to. We have the access to the software, and all we have to do is log in. It's up to the commission to say let's go or not.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Kaufman?
David Kaufman. I'm certainly interested and willing to help out as needed. Am I looking at the six of you in here? If we're looking at page 12, which is the population 2020 adjusted. Is it reasonable for me when I'm looking at that to see that line between District 4 and 7 without even getting to the point where I'm looking at where the communities are? Is it reasonable for me to view that as a starting point for identifying what looks to be a community that has grown that's now split between two districts, or am I missing the point here in terms of what our work is?
Mr. Burt?
I can fill this. Mark Burt, Office of Planning and Zoning. Down there, that line between District 4 and 7, that's Crofton. And there is a will to, from the last Revision Commission to keep Crofton in one area. I've drawn a couple different scenarios trying to keep Crofton either in 7 or 4. And that population in there has grown so much that it puts both of them, no matter where you put it, and where you draw that line, it puts both of those districts out of the 5% range.
I'm not, Mr. Waddy?
Thank you. I just wanted to say, yes, I'm happy to join any group that wants to meet, a small group to talk about maps. And I wanted to say that we already received public comment in regards to, drawing some of these lines. And we had someone mention their community in District 3 in discussion about school attendance. And this person said Glen Burnie portion of District 3 is very small, and my representation is more focused on Chesapeake and Northeast, but my kids go to school in Glen Burnie. And so it's already been, and we have a couple other comments as well that we received, and I just wanted to put that out there that, people are really thinking and paying attention.
Thank you. Mr. Snow?
To these points, question for planning and zoning. If I am able to provide, with the permission of the commission, a draft of a map that I created in a tool, would you consider adapting it for this platform within your thing? I know that the tool that I'm using is much higher level than the census blocks, but if I am able to send that, with the permission of the commission, as just an option, kind of thinking down the ideas that I had about what do we do with the Western District, how would you prefer? Could I just send you a link to the tool that I'm using that already has the districts, or would you like just a printout of the map from that? What would work the best for you?
Mark Burt, Planning and Zoning. Either a link to your drawing of those districts or a PDF representation, static map would either one will work.
Okay, sounds good.
Which program are you using to draw them?
Districtor.
Districtor.
It's an open source districting tool. And so I guess the next question would be for the commission, is the commission open-minded to seeing a proposal that I have that does, again, admittedly getting, focusing on the fact that it was obvious that we have like a little under half of our population in one district. It does make substantial changes, but I don't think that they are unreasonable, and I don't see them as particularly tectonic. So what would that process be for getting approval from the commission to submit that to planning and zoning for consideration?
From my perspective, I think, I'd be willing to look at just about anything, maybe for the purpose of our evaluation to determine how we might want to interact with planning and zoning or whatnot, if it's possible that you could provide us with whatever link you had.
Sure.
That would allow us to kind of look at the map, maybe play with some other things. I'm just spitballing with that. And I think that would give all of us kind of an opportunity to kind of evaluate what you're talking about, and then maybe revisit that with all of us on Wednesday.
Yep. Everyone comfortable with that?
I actually have the link. If you want, I can send it to you now. If everyone wanted to see it, just the concept in general, or we can wait and see what they come up with. It's whatever. But I'll send you what I can.
Yeah, let's Mark Burt, Planning and Zoning. Let's actually do it, and we can draw it tonight, see what it looks like, so you guys can see how how we can set up these scenarios or these plans, and the ease of the software.
Okay. Before we get, so I know we already had some things that you were going to be preparing for us for Wednesday's meeting. Any of the commission members have any other variations or things they would like for planning to work on at this
I
point?
do have one other request. Ashley Hanglater, is there any way that we can also see another layer of the school districts, especially as we consider this and the fact that we now have a new high school for the first time in quite some time that is focused in an area that is split? I just think that a layer of school districts would really be helpful in determining communities.
Okay, no, thank you. That's a good point. Yes, sounds good. All right, so Mr. Perdue, what is it, like 8:30? Okay, so how about we take a shot? Why don't you pull some things up, and if we can start to play and draw lines a little bit, just to see how it works. Is that doable, workable for everybody? Well, since we're here, and then determine our next steps.
Mark Barrett, Office of Planning and Zoning. Ms. Handleiter,
It's a
there,
link,
there is a web map in the that's shared to the group that has the school, all the school districts and all that. I've saved it. And it's down in the order. I'll find it and get it for you.
Thank you very much.
Make a connection.
Stephen Waddy. I was just reading a comment from one of the public testimony. People from public testimony says, he's talking to us as the commission members, asking for a kind of metric. He says, based on that, determine the metrics that should be used for a successful redistribution. You know, what makes up a success for us in this moment is what this person is asking. He says, the group is not clear what the impact this revision will have, what the downstream impact is or influence that this redistribution will have, how will it impact voting districts, school districts, how much money is invested in a community, etc. The group is not clear on what the metrics of success are for this project. How do we judge if one iteration is better than the other? How do we define a healthy district zoning? I think we've discussed a lot of that in our previous meetings. And what measures should we use to quantify this health? In an age of computer algorithms and machine learning and advanced data modeling, it seems inappropriate that we should leave it up to human eyes to decipher the various layers of data in an attempt to carve the map as successfully as possible. So there was an interesting comment that we received. We did have a couple other comments as well. Cool. And I say that to say that, you know, we have previously brought up other communities of interest. I think school districts is going to be a community of interest. And that is, for some of us, higher on our what makes a successful map, and others, it may be another type of redistribution that makes a successful map, or at least consideration of distribution that makes a successful map. And it helps to us, for us to be able to think about these things, and I appreciate the public comment associated with that.
Okay, thank you. Yep. I think as we kind of continue through our work and as we look at districts more closely and lines and how things are shifting, I think we'll be answering a lot of those questions. I'm just not sure we're at a point where we can say that definitively right now.
I mean, I think we all think about what makes up a community in terms of, you know, not just schools, but also senior centers and, you know, hospitals, healthcare access, to even taxing districts, and whether or not they are, you know, what aspects of a community are, I don't mean to only look this way, I'm sorry. But what aspects of a community, what aspects of our communities make up a community. Traffic concerns, I know, is a big one as well for us, for a lot of us.
All right, Mr. Burt, wow us with your mapping tools.
All right, so I'm going to, Mark Burt, Office of Planning and Zoning. I'm going to go back to the beginning here. We're in the software as we're redistricting online. We ran through a little tutorial of this before. We're here at the opening, so I'm going to create a new plan. What this allows us to do is, you know, do district, precinct, ward. So we're going to do a district. We're going to do districts. We're going to set our number of districts at 7. So many we have currently. We're going to set our maximum standard deviation, percentage deviation from the ideal population at 10%. That'll give us 5% on either side. Make sure that we have 2020 census data Go down here to counties. We'll find Maryland adjusted, and we'll go to Anne Arundel. The data hierarchy here is it's going to go from the county to tract to block group to block. When you zoom in, that's what you're going to see. You'll see the county, then you'll see the census tract, then you'll see the block group, and you'll zoom in further and see the block. Here we can see we have 8 categories and unassigned, and districts 1 through 7. The unassigned will go away as we assign those census blocks or the census geographies to the 7 districts. Here is where we can set our statistics, our census statistics. It comes in just looking at the total population. We can look at the total voting age, and we can also set to look at race and ethnicity. If we want to look at voting, the voting public age, the population over 18 voting age, we can add that in also. We can also add in custom variables if we have any we want to look at. So with that, it creates the plan. Since this is plan number 7 for me, I'm going to call it adjustment plan. Number 7, of course. And as it's creating the plan, talk a little bit about the statistics here that we can see on the screen. In the table here, we can see the 7 districts. You can see our ideal population of 83,633 for each district. That's the population we want to get close to. We have 5% plus or minus to reach that. Now, this is very easy to start to assign these districts. Of course, that's the process that we'll be following here. We'll be using the draw. We'll look at the summary tables. We'll look at the integrity reports, and we'll create a couple reports for this. Just a couple other things here. Skip that. All right. So we want to start assigning to District 1. I accidentally, of course, oh, there it is. I thought I closed the PDF. All right. So it looks like, okay. All right, I can draw that. So we'll set this to the block group because I think that's what it looks like it was drawn on in this image.
Do you want to look at my...
Yeah, sure. That's great. I think we can get close to this. I don't know if it was at the track level. Mr. Snow, do you know what level this was drawn at, the tract or block group level?
I am uncertain. Well, let me check here.
Yeah, I'm looking at like this shape.
Right here?
This is the map that I'd run the public's open source tool.
There's the road coming down right there.
Oh, yeah.
179.
This is the
right there.
that we've got. This is Mr. Snell's.
Correct, yes.
So it's coming down. That intersection
Looks like it is a block group.
right there.
Okay.
There it is. What's this one right here? Okay. And this is the gross adjustment here. We'll fix these as we go along. Got way too much right there. down here. All the way down here. Yep.
So he's putting up there what you've drawn. Yes. Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
could I ask Mr. Snow a couple questions?
Certainly.
This is Christina Pompa from the Office of Planning and Zoning. Can you tell me again exactly what open source software this is, please?
Districtor.org. I did send the link over.
Okay. Does it have the ability to give us more, like any background data, like streets or anything else? Because really, like we can see our base map through what Mark's doing. You can see the roads, and so some geographical things that we can follow. This map is very sparse, so it is harder to follow for us.
There is, I have looked at the data for it, so I've extracted it just for the sake of data conversion, and so I don't know if a raw, like a CSV or a JSON file would work for you. There is the ability to export it for the purposes of using. I just watched some tutorials on it, and they said that this is what planning and zoning would probably ask for, was an extract of the data for import. But
Mark Brett, Planning and Zoning, if it can be exported out of the shapefile, do you have that option?
is that .shp?
Yep.
Yes, that is an option.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know that there was the link with it. My apologies. Oh, right on.
If you click the bars in the upper right corner, there should be an export plan.
All right, I know you've already started going through this process, but I'm wondering if it would be easier to use, to give more time to allow you guys to take a look at the data. So maybe start mapping some things out with data you already have versus Mr. Snow's at this point, unless you think you can pull it together quickly.
If you could, it's Mark Brett, if you just give me about 3 to 5 minutes, I'll be up
Okay.
and running here, no problem.
Okay, great. Sounds good. Thanks.
I'm sure if you want, you can always call it a 5-minute recess, and then you guys can just walk around for a sec. It's up to you. You have
Yeah,
thoughts, Bob?
couple minutes recess. We can just randomly. Okay, sounds good. Let's do that. All right. So, Mr. Burt, just a quick question. I guess how much more time do you think you need? So I was going to start another conversation.
Not very, Mark Burt, Planning and Zoning, not very much more. You can start another conversation and we can,
Okay.
it won't take me very much.
Okay, I guess I want to throw back out to the group your thoughts and kind of what I proposed about a smaller group kind of getting together to look at maps and proposals to kind of help narrow our focus. I mean, I know at the meeting on Wednesday, we have the maps that Planning and Zoning already produced for us, and with those maps, they were going to do kind of the key that would help us better understand how things shifted from the base map to the other scenarios. They were going to overlay the communities that were identified through the GDP and things like that, which I think will help to better inform what those scenarios look like. But I guess I'm going to put back on the table again your thoughts on trying to get a smaller group of 2 to 3 people, maybe to dig into that a little more specifically, to make sure, whatever scenarios we put out there. So we do have, however, they may not be perfect scenarios because they're going to be, we're going to be receiving public comment on them. But I think we at least want to vet them in some way and have a proposal that we would then discuss to somewhat approve and finalize to put out as draft for public comment. So thoughts on?
Does it make sense maybe to wait and see what we get map-wise? And if we end up with stuff that we're working off of Wednesday, and we're like, oh, maybe we don't need to do that. But overall, I think that's probably a great idea. Because certainly, clearly some of us have a better concept of this at the moment than some other ones do. It might be able to kind of be of assistance in that regard.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Mr. Waddy?
Like I said, I'd be happy to join. I think if we can come up with, we have contiguity, compactness, and maintaining communities. We kind of have a baseline of what we're doing. And I think that if we can go with the baseline and then trying to maintain communities and not veer too far from the current, or we can look at what the current one is and veer far or not, but we can present those options as kind of baselines. We have several baselines that we can go from to be able to present to people. I think that's going to be the start. We have the basic legal parameters that are given to us, and then we can kind of go from there and move with the layers that we get from the OPZ. When do we want to do this? That's really what my question is. When?
Well, obviously, it would need to be soon, and I think it is a valid point. We're going to have these additional layers for Wednesday's meeting, so having that information to help inform what that was going to look like would probably be helpful in that discussion. But I think generally, the first public hearing is December 13th, so we need to have something that's going to go out to the public, sometime next week to give them enough time to review it and put it back out.
So I think you mentioned you're going to be away for a week or so, and I think, Ashley, Ms. Hangleiter, you were going to be away as well at some period of time?
I am, yes.
Okay, so actually what you're saying makes perfect sense, because we're going to need to not only do that quickly, but we're going to have a limited number of people to really get into it anyway. Okay.
Yeah, I guess so. Okay.
Stephen Waddy again. I just wanted to say, I bring up the criteria to go by to see if any other commissioners have criteria that they want us to incorporate in these maps in a small group discussion. So, that way we can have, Larry or Ashley's opinion in our, I don't mean to use your first names, but in our discussion about the different maps, or mine if I'm not there, so that we can at least have those baseline opinions, thoughts as the commissioners, and then whoever is there to discuss it can incorporate them in their thoughts in that three-person meeting.
Larry Telford, Mr. Waddy, I'll respond to your question. I agree with everything you said. I think we need to recognize, though, that as Mr. Snow points out, we have a lot of growth out in West County, and I think any kind of redraw of a map needs to address that.
Yeah, and some of those issues, I know for me, I have a hard time thinking through that without actually seeing what the map looks like and how, where the lines are drawn and how it pulls in the various, census data. I have a hard time. I mean, obviously, my goal, I would say, is I want districts that are balanced population-wise, as close as we can get them. And I want to ensure that, racially, ethnically, they are also balanced based on the populations within the jurisdictions in those census tracts. And I think, the other qualifications, I think largely we do have, contiguous districts and things like that. But I guess I have to look, knowing we have some base drawings, how things are then shifted to pull in, to balance those things out. And I think for me, it's hard. That's what I would give as parameters for my interest, but without actually seeing what the maps look like, I have a harder time really envisioning that or what those shifts would be. Because I think it's a matter of sitting down and trying and playing with them and seeing what happens to balance out right for everybody.
Larry Telford, just one more comment. If you take a look at what happened 10 years ago, basically all this commission had to do is take some people, I think, from Council 4 and move it into Council 1. It was a pretty easy fix. Like I said before, because of all the numbers going out in West County and the three sort of peninsula districts of 3, 5, and 6, I guess it is, I don't think it's going to be quite that simple just to switch a few precincts around solely for the purpose of at least the balancing of the districts.
Mr. Snow?
That's kind of was my issue. I tend to agree with you that this data has kind of altered some of my assumptions as to what was going on in the county. So there's growth in areas that I wasn't understanding or wasn't thinking there would be. So I think I need to visualize. It's why what Mr. Snow's done here is actually incredibly helpful. But I think at the end of the day, you're correct. It's a matter of, I need to see something concrete at this point before I would even have a thought on a district.
Okay, Mr. Snow?
Yeah, Tory Snow. I think that my only request of this commission would be that as we go into the public hearing, I'm totally comfortable with offering an adjusted map based on what we currently have, but I do feel strongly that we should give the public the opportunity to weigh in on something that could be a more robust change. So even if it's just, this is what planning and zoning has from a simple adjustment, this is what could theoretically happen if we decided to make a bigger change. I think I feel powerfully resentful of the fact that we are given an incredibly intense deadline in the holiday season to make a monumental change that is going to impact this county for the next 10 years. And so the pressure that we've already felt related to this is incredibly unfair to ask of me, who tries to be someone that takes this responsibility very seriously. And so if we are approaching this from a perspective of we want to meet the demands of the county council for what they have asked to get us this timeline, to me, which feels like an unreasonable deadline. And I think I probably wouldn't have felt this way until I saw how planning and zoning felt when we basically, before Thanksgiving, asked them to do an incredible amount of work. And I feel that the county council and everyone that's involved with this entire process should at least be open to the fact that we really would like the opportunity to put proper time and thought into this entire conversation. So I think my only request would be that if we go down this road, that as we approach our public hearing, that yes, we can offer something with simple adjustments, but also we could say, if we had more time and if we really wanted to consider this is something that we feel would be more in line with the way that our county looks. So that would basically be my, let's at least commit to offering at least one, I don't know if non-traditional, but one fresh look at the maps as opposed to just a simple fix based on the time that we have.
Mr. Kaufman?
David Kaufman. This may be a point of clarification or a request for the terminology. I think we want to be careful about setting a criteria of wanting to establish racially balanced districts because our county is not geographically and proportionately distributed racially. So I would want to make sure that this group that's going to assemble doesn't have as a goal, and I don't think that was the intent of the statement that was made, but I want to make sure that we allow the data to inform what our neighborhoods look like rather than attempting to establish an artificial balance simply because that's an idealistic and noble goal, but we have communities that don't have that uniformity of racial balance. So I want to make sure that I think representation of our communities in our districts, for me, that is everything keeps funneling back to that singular philosophical understanding is that that's what our job is to get. I'm not suggesting that I thought that there was an inappropriate suggestion by seeking to have a balanced racial makeup in the districts.
Oh, and I'm sorry if that's what I was, well, I probably wasn't speaking, that's not what I was intending at all in my comment. So, but thank you. All right, so I think we have the data ready now, so we can kind of revisit that. And I understand that we may have discussions on Wednesday. Maybe we'll luck out and this will make it a moot point. I don't know, but I just want to have a plan going forward to do our work. So, Mr. Burt?
Okay, thank you, Chairwoman. Mark Burt, Planning and Zoning. So what we have on the screen now is the adjustment plan that Mr. Snow put together using districtor.org. You can see that there are 92 residents unassigned. I must have missed a census block here and there. It does allow you to review here in the total. So it does allow you to review the districts. So with this plan, districts 2 and 4 need to increase their populations at least by 5,000 apiece to get up around 80,000 residents to try to balance it out because they are underneath the 5% standard deviation. Other than that, the plan definitely is a different look at our districts. We can zoom in here, take a look at them. It is showing 2 is non-contiguous, so I'll run through. So this is a good review here. So we can run a compactness test just to see how compact the districts are. Each of these values, I'd have to read up a little more about the values, but it does, each value does have a weight behind it. We can also check the integrity. So it's running through, it's checking to see if any census blocks were assigned to 2 districts, if the population summary checks out, if the district count checks out, if the maximum deviation checks out, anything. So with the red X's, you have to go back and check those. So we'll start with the maximum deviation check, and it's telling us 4. It is out of the deviation. We'll come back and address that here in a minute. It'll also be for the range check also. We can see that the deviation percentages here, 4 is minus 10% off. Same with 2. District 7 and 6 would also have to come down. So 4 and 2 would have to increase their populations in this scenario, and 7 and 5 would have to increase their populations.
Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Kaufman.
David Kaufman. Before we get too far into first off, again, kudos for translating that which you received tonight and getting it to us in this. I mean, it's incredibly impressive. There would be value for me in hearing just what it was that Mr. Snow was going after in in just like the stepping back, because before you get down and fix the 2 districts that need the 5,000, and before we, like, it would be interesting for me to know what it is that this change is attempting to accomplish, or what informed it, because again, we've talked about data being the driver for our discussions here, so if that's reasonable.
Yep, Mr. Snow.
Oh, well, that was exactly what I was going to do, because I wanted to make it clear that this is about a rough draft. That's my 2nd grade English teacher coming out, just get something out there and put it together. So if you zoom out, but if you zoom out, this was a strictly data-driven, how do we tell a story about our county, and how does that work from a representation standpoint. And so from a process standpoint, I used a heat map to basically map out where the concentrations of population were. And the thing that I could not get away from is in that northwest corner of Anne Arundel County, I believe the population there is about 250,000 people. Now, if the numbers are right in here, we have a total of 585. So half the population is concentrated in that corner of Anne Arundel County. It made no logical sense for us to ignore the fact that we only have one and maybe like a small percentage of another representative over there. The other thing that I was kind of thinking is that if I were a representative and if I were someone that wanted to reach the communities in my neighborhood, if I had community events in one part of my district and wanted to attend another one, what does that drive look like, right? What does that route look like? And obviously we couldn't get that perfectly, but especially in that highly densely populated corner of the county, it made it so that the person representing those districts would be able to provide adequate and appropriate coverage. It's less of a, I'm sorry, I'd have to drive, a mile. Obviously, that's still a challenge in District 7, but it is a rural district. And so that was something that when I was looking through the map, I didn't detect a ton of issues. The 2 heart districts, right, you've got Centers District 5 and District 6, those were problematic, right? Because District 6 does cross water, and I think that, you've got Annapolis in there, and I figure there might be a way to address that through how we approach this, but that's the general philosophy was, how's the population distributed? How are we distributed throughout the county? And do we have districts that make logical and reasonable sense? And I just wanted to kind of get us to think in that context, and I guess we can kind of go from there.
Okay, I guess a couple questions. I know it looks like, actually, some of these, like, towns and things, like Jennings, I've never heard of them before. Jennings, I guess that must be a neighborhood. I was like, what is Jennings? I have no idea. But I guess, really, 2 questions. Whoops, shoot, I just had the map up and now I just lost it on myself. I know we had District 7 that largely wanted to maintain a rural feel to it, and I know what we have here, knowing that there's probably some tweaks that need to be made for adjustments in some districts, but I know this is taking District 7 into the Annapolis area, which maybe something, if I'm reading it correctly, or is that?
I don't know that. So I tried to keep Annapolis more or less its own district. As a matter of fact, with Annapolis, my main concern is we have good population density in Annapolis. My main concern was the Cape St. Clair area over there. That's the part that would feel fairly alienated from that perspective. So that is tricky. But once again, there is a storyline here, right? Like, and even just looking at some of the books about, our coastal communities and areas of common interest, obviously areas like flooding and title, things like that. Like, those are going to be things that are common. Like, my favorite thing about this approach was that it told a story about Anne Arundel County. And you could look at each of the council districts, and you could see, like, District 7, that's more or less rural, obviously not perfect, but, you know, District 6, that's the coastlines, right? Same thing with District 3 coming in with Pasadena. District 5 is kind of the heart, right? You've got the you know, the college there and the heartbeat of Anne Arundel County. District 4, obviously a huge service for Fort Meade, you know, our military communities, a lot of people living there. District 2, that industrialized urban type of Anne Arundel County, and then of course District 1 really being the suburb, kind of the touch point with Baltimore, and hopefully being in a position to take advantage of generous investments, you know, with infrastructure and jobs and opportunities, right? That really is kind of where I'm at. So yeah, the details, yeah, we're going to have to figure those out, but I mean, this is just an opportunity to rethink Anne Arundel County, and I think transform our representation. That's a big part of that. I hope that helps.
Okay. Any other comments or questions about the revised maps? Yep, Mr. Telford?
Mr. Snow, I guess if I'm looking at this right, you basically, Council 5, which is where I live now, which is basically Broad Neck and kind of goes into Sereno Park, you've kind of taken the, I don't know exactly where that stops, but at some point you take the Cape St. Clair area and you're putting it with the Annapolis Peninsula. And isn't that the way the Senate district works at some level? Doesn't that, I guess the question also to legal is there any issues with crossing water boundaries to do something like this? Because I guess at the state level they do that anyway, don't they? This is Larry Telford speaking.
Kelly Kenny, Supervising County Attorney. I'd have to look at the state lines because I definitely don't have those memorized, but I know that those districts are kind of all over the place. I know that, you know, waterways are considered to be sometimes a natural boundary as far as drawing lines, but I don't think that is a be-all and end-all that you have to absolutely draw lines, you know, based on water. So I don't think that would necessarily be prohibited.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Kaufman?
Yeah, David Kaufman. Is it not accurate that many of the addresses in the Cape St. Clair area are actually Annapolis addresses, even though it's not Annapolis City proper?
Correct.
Yeah, I have to continue to navigate around the waterway issue, but it's a bridge. Like we're a county that has a lot of water, and this is a bridge that connects it's not the Chesapeake Bay, you know, it's not 5 miles of bridge. It's I don't think I'm concerned about the geography component because I feel like there's a lot about Annapolis that's similar to Cape St. Clair. What I am most concerned about is if this is the direction that if there's energy behind this as a commission or energy behind this from the general public, I would advocate very strongly that we make our recommendation post February 26th. I don't think it's realistic to expect a sitting council is going to vote this dramatically to change their district. I don't think that's a realistic expectation, and perhaps not even a fair one. Granted, the timeline isn't one we created, but for us to offer something that is as transformational as this may be, I think that we would be running into the likelihood that it would not get any traction if it is that transformational.
No, I guess that I would agree. That was actually my other question, how this configuration, what it does for sitting council members and how it shifts them around into different districts and things like that, which I think is something we do at least need to consider as we put forward a proposal.
Certainly. If I can respond to both. Again, this happens every 3 or 4 years. I'm totally fine with that, right? But at this point in time, this is a 10-year, and I think that I can tell you from personal experience running in the 4th Council District, I spent a lot of time in the Western District of Council 4, and a lot of feedback was, I have never met my councilman, right? I've never had a, they come out like once or twice a year. It's a 30-minute drive, right? And I'm trying to campaign after work, and I'm doing an event over in Millersville, and then literally an hour drive, depending on the traffic, to go over to Russet in Maryland City. I do feel that I understand that it's not fair to ask this to the council, but I also don't think it's fair for the council to ask us to do a 10-year project in a month and a half. So, if the public has energy behind this, that's more what I am interested in, right? If we can give the public an opportunity, and if they say, look, we'd rather stick with something simple, we'll come back to this later, I'm totally fine with that. But I at least would like to give people the opportunity to communicate to us, to say that, this is a big deal, this is something that you're working for. If they come to us and say, we'd at least like to consider this in our public input session, then I think that might be something where we have that conversation. But if there's not a lot of energy behind it, again, the entire purpose behind this exercise was to just bring a level of gravity to this entire 10-year process that we're working on. So I definitely understand the concerns, and I knew that would be the pushback from it, but I do feel that if we want to have an impact, if we really want to live up to what we're trying to do as a commission, we should at least give the public the opportunity to say, we'd like you to take some more time to really think about this, to help us improve our representation. So
Thank you. And I definitely really appreciate all the work you did to pull the map together and stuff. I think it was also, I think, kind of got me thinking more like what if we have, or we are able to have kind of a two-pronged approach to this. At least, we do try to balance out the districts for the most immediate near term for the upcoming election, so we ensure that at least our current residents are represented in that election process in a more balanced manner. And then if, once we have the conversations about the other charter amendments and potentially adding districts, which I think you make a good point. I mean, District 4 is a large district. And, to travel back through that district, I mean, going from Russet down into Crownsville, I mean, it's a large area. And to get out there and attend all of those community meetings, I'm sure is probably difficult. But, which also kind of gave me the thought, maybe we could have, if we have a two-pronged approach, deal with our immediate need, and then kind of get into the more broader conversations about what these districts should look like, and then figure out what our process would be to propose changes to those to make them more balanced as we kind of see fit. But thank you. Mr. Waddy?
Thank you, Mr. Snow, for putting the effort in to reimagine, I guess, the districts as and tell the story in the way that you have. And I think this definitely speaks to some of the population concerns in West County and the possible growth in the future with, we have a lot of development even coming to District 4. There'll be an increase in the number of people that will be, or a number of neighborhoods that are going to be built over the next 10 years as well. So that experience of having to campaign in a bunch of places is going to increase. And whereas I think for District 3 in the current iteration, it's been described as being built out, and that there won't be any future massive increases in the same way that District 4 has. I do wonder if Planning and Zoning has any thoughts in terms of that, the future build out of these particular districts. I don't need to hear it tonight, but it's just a thought. And I also wanted to say that the districts some of what we're talking about is redistricting. The other things that we're talking about are representation. And representation equates to me to power, and whether or not the county council has particular powers that the county executive does not have, or does the county executive have particular powers that the county council does not have, which is another part of our discussion in regards to this charter revision. And so I want to say that, addressing some of the issues of whether or not you've seen your representative is something. It does go to the size of the district, but it also goes to what powers your representative feels like they can exercise in your particular district. If your representative feels like there is no power over of policing, to give you an example, but your area is heavily policed, then they may not come to your area that may experience something that is not within their power. You see what I'm saying? So I think that I just want to keep that in mind when we're talking about what it means to be a representative in this mapping. And I'd like to see certain aspects of how county functions occur in order for me to be able to understand what it's like for representation, or what it's like for communities even. What's the community experiencing, for me to be able to understand what would provide them better representation. And I think, but also that's going to go to our future discussions as well.
Right, there's lots of lights. Okay.
I was going to say Mr. Snow was before me, but I didn't see Mr. Kaufman.
I think Mr. Kaufman, I think you were next.
Okay, David Kaufman. So one question for legal. In referring to the two-prong approach, if the second prong does not include a charter amendment, if the districts remain at 7, is it possible to propose, as the chairwoman has mentioned, is it possible to propose and adopt a redistricting for the 22 election and then follow up with another 7-district recommendation that would be considered for adoption after that time? If it's if it doesn't require a charter amendment, there's no referendum necessary, but can the council, and you don't have to answer it to me right now, but as we're exploring a two-prong approach, is that even something that's feasible if there's no change in districts?
Kelly County, Supervising County Attorney. So let me make sure I understand your question. Are you asking basically whether the council could redraw the lines for this coming fall and then redraw the lines again after that point?
That's my understanding of what a two-prong approach would be if there is no change in district number.
If I could clarify, I guess I had in my mind we were going to be having a conversation about adding districts, and it would be a part of that conversation that we would be providing guidance on what those new, if it's 9 districts, for an example, like what those districts would look like, which could take into consideration some of the issues that we've been discussing and that Mr. Snow identified through his maps.
Yep.
I wasn't necessarily proposing that we would be drawing another 7-council district map.
I guess the question is, could we?
But yeah, I guess that is a question.
It really is, it's guiding the nature of the discussion. So if there is an appetite, again, I'm going to go one lane. If there's an appetite to take this, tweak it, adjust it, and that's really the direction we want to go, then it's a one-prong approach. We're looking at going ahead and just making the adjustments to the existing map. If the sense is, either among the commission members or among the public comment, that this is an approach that people want to have energy behind, a suggestion to modify, adjust our population to get the 22 election right, and then provide further discussion, opportunity, and input, and so forth. But it there's no way it would be done, I think realistically, before all of the things that would have to take place in order for the council to approve it prior to February 26th. So then the question is, do we do that initial work and then do any additional follow-up work, or even can we, because is it not the adoption of the commission's recommendation that they're pursuing?
Kelly County Supervising County Attorney. Let me clarify the two-pronged approach that we were talking about earlier in the evening, because I think maybe we're talking about two different things. As Ms. Mansfield,
we are.
right.
Okay.
As Ms. Mansfield indicated, the two-pronged approach that I was, discussing at that time was doing your redistricting and then proposing a charter amendment that would add additional councilmanic districts or at-large positions, whatever the case may be, that would have to go along in two different ways. What you're suggesting.
Asking.
I'm not sure that could really occur, because don't forget that this commission only has 1 year to do their work. So logistically, I don't see how the timing would work, where you would make two proposals to the council and have two things adopted by the council. I think, if that's really the approach the commission wants to take, I think, as Mr. Snow recommended, you might want to spend more time getting it right and proposing that to the council, in one report at whatever time, and be that, and it may be after February, it may be after that point, but proposing that to the council. But logistically, I don't see how the timing would really work, where two proposals on 7 councilmanic districts could be made to the county council, and once your report to the council is what triggers the redistricting, and that only occurs every 10 years, so they wouldn't really have the opportunity to do it once and then do it again, because the charter constrains that to be every 10 years.
Yep. And I will just make a very brief statement. One of the things that, in looking at this, that is interesting to me for us to at least consider as we're looking at it, is that rather than the current model where all of the spindles meet in weird spots as part of this spoke in kind of a weird center, District 5, by its nature of being central to the county, provides an opportunity 10 years from now for the nature of adjustment to be more distributive among all of them. And I would also, last thing, I would just caution against talking about the geographic distance that we're trying to minimize in District 4, because if I lived in District 7, I wouldn't be very sympathetic.
Very good point.
True.
Mr. Fleckenstein?
Although it dovetails into the conversation about representation, right? I mean, Mr. Snow's point about travel and who gets to see their representative and things of that nature, I think actually is a very big consideration when we're looking at representation. Candidly, it's one of the things that's kind of informed my mind that perhaps we need more council persons, because I think that's a problem throughout the county, that a lot of people feel that way. But even from the perspective of the council person, right? These folks at the moment are all working theoretically part-time. And I don't know, I think we probably all know at least 1 or 2 council persons. It seems to me they work a hell of a lot more than part-time. And when you've got a large district, for instance, again, we'll take 7 out of it, because I think the whole rural character of that district has always been something that that district has actually enjoyed as part of its identity. But let's look at those others, right? If you can't get your council person's attention, or if your council person doesn't have the ability, because of the number of people they represent, that they can actually give the time and attention that they need, you've got a representation problem, right? And we can't necessarily fix that with geography, although we can to an extent. But I think all of that plays into that, and that's, I think, why that is a legitimate concern as to, if you want to be at the Crofton Parade, then the Odenton Parade, or whatever it happens to be, I think your constituents have a right to believe that that can be accomplished in their district. And I think it's also not, we have to be mindful of the workload that we put on the council persons, because I think they all would express a lot of frustration at not being able to really do all the things they would like to do in representing their constituents, given the number of people they represent. Now, we may all ultimately discard that idea, but To me, that's one of the major things that we need to consider when we're putting the districts together is how the people are represented and how the council persons are able to represent them. Can I respond?
Well,
I never identified myself. I'm sorry.
Mr. Snow had his
Tom
light on.
Fleckenstein.
So, go ahead. And then-
Sure. No, I just wanted to express appreciation to the fellow commissioners for the open conversation about this, because I think that people generally understand the spirit behind this proposal, right? There are details that are going to be worked out, but it really does stem from a philosophical belief that the United States was built on a system of representative government, and a huge part of local representation is that your local representative, theoretically, you might run into at the grocery store. Theoretically, you might, meet at the barber shop or something along those lines, right? Obviously, in a county like ours, it's a little bit different, but this really does speak to a desire to allow communities. And I think that one thing that cannot be overlooked, and this was just incidental, right? But it can't be overlooked that we have a significant minority community in Anne Arundel County, and it hasn't necessarily been reflected in our legislators. However, if you paid attention in the last election cycle, District 32 turned out a number of minority candidates, right? Delegate Rogers, Sandy Bartlett, right? And so it does speak to the geographic nature specifically of West County. And if you look at the data and the demographics, I'm sure if you did demographic analysis on this, you would find that a lot of communities that had previously been soaked up by these other fragmented communities would find themselves being more relevant in the conversation. And that is certainly the case as even in what is now District 2, or it'll be I think it's in District 2, over in the Pioneer City area, where they are now getting a rec center. That had to be done in large part with the advocacy of the state delegates, right? Delegate Rogers and such. And honestly, those initiatives should be spearheaded by the council. Why are things happening at that level? Well, a lot of it has to do with the fact that the council districts really need to be designed in such a way that there's better representation. So I do think that the geography is a huge component, and the geography, the numbers, the data informed this design. But I would just, encourage, if we have work groups or anything, to consider that element along with it. Thanks.
Mr. Waddy?
Thank you so much, Stephen Waddy. I did want to say, again, bringing it to the charter discussion, you mentioned, I just want to respond first, Tori, you mentioned the state delegates. They have multi-member districts. I think that if we're talking about individuals not being able to represent a particular geographic space, then we can add district members. We can add membership. We could request that in a charter amendment. The other, in terms of part-time work, that's another aspect of our charge is addressing the pay of council members and how elections are run. There's a lot of structural aspects of our charter that need to be addressed to the 21st century, and that will allow for council members to have larger staff, improved staff, increased staff, more professional staff. And all of those aspects, I think, play a role in representation and identifying how representation works, and being able to see someone at your local grocery store also depends on whether or not you live in a food desert, how far away the grocery store is from your house. I think in what you mentioned in District 4, I know I've heard that complaint. I live around the corner from one, personally. So, people that there's a large population and no one can even walk to a grocery store that has fresh food. And this is in District 4 right now. So it actually is split between District 4 and 1, I think, is over there in Mead Village, Still Meadows area. So That's what I mean in terms of addressing some of the charter issues in addition to the population. I think that the map can be altered in a way that is takes in current political boundaries, and then we can also look at how to improve the charter to improve representation. I think that's where we can make those other changes in regards to. That's why I like to know what it is that we're talking about. Okay.
Okay, Mr. Kaufman?
David Kaufman. To Commissioner Fleckenstein's comments about representation, I couldn't agree more. Having one person represent over 80,000 constituents is a lot. And simply adding 2 districts would reduce that load by close to 20,000, a little over 20,000 fewer constituents. The number of constituents is, for me, the discussion about, I mean, even these districts, okay, technically are compact comparatively to other areas of the county. I mean, there's nothing inherently not accurate about the current map. I just, as we're moving the conversation forward, I don't want to see the work we have in an incredibly idealistic and altruistic mindset of a council or of a commission that really wants to do the right thing. I don't want to see us strategically throw forth an initiative that is not likely to get passed because ultimately there aren't going to be 5 people in the council to pass it at the time we present it. So I just want to make sure that we're mindful of that as we're moving our work forward, even if the answer is a simple modification of this map, because once we go through, once they go through and we look at the census blocks and then we find out that there's things that weren't in Mr. Snow's, like, we don't know that yet because we're just seeing it for the first time tonight. So we're going to his point, this is a point of exploration. And we now have it in the hands of trained professionals that can navigate through the issues we're going to have to deal with. But as we're moving forward, if we're in this kind of a headspace, whether it's 7 or 9, I just want to caution us about how we manage the timeline.
Mr. Snow?
Sure, and just to offer greater insight, perhaps a rebuttal, I would say that the desire to kind of keep the status quo in pursuit of a distant goal